This day in sports history. Part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sports. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's July 12th, and on this day in 1979, it was a promotional night that got a bit out of hand and still lives in infamy today. Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind & Fire, I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, Ring My Bell by Anita Ward, and of course, Disco Inferno by the Tramps, songs that when you hear them immediately send you back to the 70s, the enchanted land of platform shoes, flared bottom pants, and crazy DJs spinning up your favorite dance records. But, and you may find this hard to believe, but not everybody likes disco music. In fact, there are people who hate it with a passion. And one of those guys who hated disco in the 70s and still hates it is Steve Dahl. Steve was a DJ at Chicago's WLUP in 1979, and part of his hatred for disco music is that he lost his job at another radio station because of a change in format from rock to disco. There were a lot of radio stations making the switch to disco in those days. Well, on the south side of Chicago, the White Sox were always looking for ways to sell more tickets and bring more people to the ballpark. Bill Veeck owned the White Sox at this point, and he was known for his stepping outside the box a bit and mixing things up when it came to promotions. On the one hand, remember, he brought in Larry Doby as the first black player in the American League when he was in Cleveland, and then he hired Doby as the second black manager in Major League Baseball to coach in Chicago. But he also had a misfire with a promotion or two, and the biggest promotional fiasco that happened on this night in 1979 was hatched in the early part of the season. Now, Veeck, along with his son Mike, who was the Sox promotional director, and DJ Steve Dahl got together, and they formulated a plan to bring people to the ballpark and promote Dahl's station 97.9 The Loop. Disco Demolition Night. Bring a disco record to the ballpark to be blown up and get in the park for 98 cents. The promotion was set for between games of a doubleheader with the Detroit Tigers on the 12th, which was a Thursday. Now, Thursday games were not big draw nights, so they figured if they could triple a typical Thursday crowd, maybe they could get 30,000 to Comiskey. That would still leave plenty of room in the 50,000-seat capacity stadium, but it'd be a good night, even with deeply discounted tickets. Dahl, fearing that nobody was going to show up, pumped up the event for weeks in advance. Mike hired security to handle a crowd of about 35,000. That should give him a little extra breathing room just in case anything got out of control. Well, the crowd coming to the ballpark on this night was a lot more than anticipated, and they stuffed and then overstuffed the big box with disco records. After a while, the boxes wouldn't hold anymore, so people just carried them inside with them. Down on the field, Game 1 was going on, and fans who still had records in their hands started throwing them on the field at the players. A few of the guys remember the records piercing the ground with a force that could possibly slice off a finger. Other things were thrown on the field, lighters, lit firecrackers, and the game had to be paused several times. Meanwhile, more and more people came through the gates. Though the official attendance that night is listed as 47,795, there were many more than that in Comiskey Park. The gates were ordered closed, and people who'd bought tickets were not allowed in. Some started jumping gates and turnstiles. Now, at that point, Mike Veeck sent most of the security that were in the stands to the gates to handle that situation. Game 1 came to an end with Detroit winning 4-1. Time now for the promotional appearance by Dahl and other 97.9 The Loop staff, and time to blow up the huge crate of records. The crowd went wild as the big box was pulled to a spot in center field. Death to disco! And at 8:40, the fuse was lit. The box exploded, sending shards of records everywhere. The explosion caused a crater in the field. A fire started blazing, and then all heck broke loose. With security at the gates, leaving the field mostly unguarded, fans started pouring out onto the field by the thousands. More fires were started. Fans shimmied down the foul pole. players who'd been out getting some fielding practice or between game cuts in the batting cage fled to the dressing room for safety and barricaded themselves inside. The batting cage was destroyed. Fights broke out, the bases were stolen, chaos reigned. Harry Carey was doing radio for the White Sox then, and he got on the PA to try to disperse the crowd. So too did Vec and Dahl. All of those words fell on deaf ears. Nobody was paying attention. Riot police had to be brought in to clear the field. 39 people were arrested. One of the participants in the riot on this night became well known much later for a completely different reason. The actor Michael Clark Duncan, best known for his role in The Green Mile, but he was in other movies such as Talladega Nights and Sin City, admitted that he jumped the wall and stormed onto the field. Duncan, a Chicago native, said he slid into second base and then he slid into third base and managed to grab one of Bill Melton's bats. He said he lost it a week later, but he was happy to have participated in a historical night. But anyway, when the field was inspected, it was deemed unplayable. The game was initially postponed, but Detroit Tigers manager Sparky Anderson protested, saying the White Sox should forfeit the game. The next day, Commissioner Fay Vincent agreed. It was the last time an American League game was forfeited. However, there are more than a few people who believe that the promotion had at least one positive effect. Disco started dying. Dahl doesn't take full credit for the demise, saying it was already on the decline, but Disco Demolition Night may have hastened it to the grave. On this night in 1949, it was the first Major League Baseball All-Star game that featured black players. The game was hosted by the Brooklyn Dodgers, and there were a lot of Dodgers represented. Jackie Robinson was in the starting lineup, but teammates Don Newcomb and Roy Campanella made an appearance for the Nationals. On the other bench, Cleveland's Larry Doby became the first black All-Star for the American League. Robinson had a double and scored, Don Newcomb had a hit and an RBI, but the American League won 11-7, with Newcomb taking the loss. And in 1992, Nigel Mansell had a drive to remember. Mansell was racing on his home track in the British Grand Prix Formula One race at Silverstone. Mansell started on the pole after a mesmerizing qualifying effort, besting his teammate by nearly 2 seconds. He kept showing that he was indeed the fastest stash in motorsport. At the drop of the green flag on this day, Mansell was actually beaten to the first corner by his teammate Riccardo Patrese. But that would be the only time that Mansell's red 5 was in anybody's rearview mirror. Mansell took the lead on the next turn and never trailed again, leading every lap on his way to his 28th F1 win, putting him one ahead of Jackie Stewart as the most successful British driver in history. He's since been surpassed by Lewis Hamilton. It was his 4th British GP win and his 7th win of the season. Mansell had a magical 92 season, winning 9 races and walking away with the Drivers' Championship, despite the fact he retired from 3 of the final 4 races. Time now for today's non-sports fun fact. And since we just talked about the British GP, did you know that Buckingham Palace has 78 bathrooms? Or should I call them loos? Anyway, 78 of them. That's it for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.